It's still the middle of winter in my Colorado garden, but today is a nice, sunny, warm day, which means it's perfect for getting outside and doing some of the necessary maintenance for my fruit trees. Join me today as I show you how I prune, train, and protect my fruit trees. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and the primary activity that usually takes place in my winter mini orchard is pruning my fruit trees. I want to prune these trees while they're still dormant, before they've set the buds and started to leaf out. And so even though it's warm today, the trees haven't started that growth cycle of spring. There's more cold coming, there's more snow coming, and the trees just seem to know that. Well, this is the time I can get into the trees and actually see the structure. And I'm looking for 4 primary reasons to prune the branches. I'm looking to take out branches that are dead. I'm looking to take out branches that might be diseased. I'll cut off the branches that are damaged. And since I'm trying to get a nice, beautiful fruit tree, anything that's disorderly, that's not growing in the right direction, needs to go. My primary tools for this job are a set of hand pruners. These are sturdy, have a sharp blade, and they're used for thin branches. And then I have loppers. These are much sturdier, and this is what I use to cut bigger, thicker branches. I take my time to prune the branches because once you cut it off, you can't put it back on. So I'll walk around the tree. Because these are fruit trees and I want a very specific shape, I already have an idea. In this case, it's a vase shape that this contender peach is being pruned into. But I always look and observe and figure out where I'm going to start so that I can make this the most efficient pruning possible and that I don't cut anything inadvertently. This cluster of branches right here is a good place to start. There's a lot of branches growing close to each other, and I can take care of a lot of the 4Ds that are happening. So this branch right here is dead. I can snap it right off. So this one definitely needs to go. So I'll cut that at the base. This other one right next to it is also dead. I can tell from the color. I've got this branch right here that's young growth, nice and pink, but it's growing into the tree and it's actually interfering with this branch right here. So I'm going to get in here and cut this branch off. This is what I mean by disorderly. It's in the way. This little tip right here is also dead. This one on the back side is also dry and dead, so it needs to go. And what I'm left with is this branch that is doing okay, but it's starting to twist towards the inside. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and cut off the whole thing, I think. Lots of work, but ultimately I'm going to leave this shoot on this side because that offers the most promising growth pattern. And this is what I like to do with my fruit trees. Nice and slow, one branch at a time, not deciding too early to remove a whole branch, but instead taking off the individual pieces that look like they're dead, damaged, diseased, or disorderly, and trying to clear up the middle of the tree so that when everything starts leafing out, they're not going to be running into each other and causing some interfering growth. Here's a good example of a branch that is not damaged yet. It's disorderly. It's growing up into this branch right here, but it runs the possibility in the wind of scraping against this branch and either damaging itself or damaging that one. So I'll come down here and remove it because it's just not in the right direction. I have another one right here that's dead. These two branches right here are also going to be rubbing against each other. The one in this direction is good. The one growing perfectly vertically needs to go. Pruning is not for the faint of heart. This branch right here is beautiful. The growth last year was wonderful. As I started looking at it, there are 3 branches growing very close together. And I wasn't sure which one to take out, which one to make the primary. And then I realized that this whole branch is actually angled towards the middle of the tree. So I have a couple options here. I can try to train it so it grows to the outside, or I can take the whole branch off. This is the dilemma that pruning brings, and I don't have to make the decision today, but it's a little bit vexing. Prune off the whole thing or take steps to train it in the right direction. I'm resistant to taking off the whole branch, and this outside branch has the potential of going in the right direction. And so a heading cut is not ideal for a case like this, but I'll go ahead and remove the 2 branches at once. If it doesn't work, I can always come back next year and remove this whole thing. So the tree looks pretty good for this first round, and I usually do this a couple times during the winter. I'm not trying to get everything done today because I like standing back and observing and trying to figure out if there's a different thing I can try to improve the shape of the tree. I'm happy with what I've done right now. When it comes to directing branches, there's a couple different things we can do to help get the tree to grow in the direction we want it to. Now, this tree actually started growing on a bit of a slant. It had a lot of leaves last year, and the wind was constantly blowing, which caused it to start growing vertically in the wrong angle. And so what I chose to do was put a rope and a bar to help pull it back to where it needs to be. Where you prune is also a great way to train the tree in the right direction. Look at the buds. This bud right here is growing outward. This bud right here is growing inward. This bud is growing to the right side, and this bud is growing to the left side. So I can direct the future growth of this branch by just choosing where I cut it and which bud is going to grow in springtime to extend the length of the branch. This tree, after pruning off the smaller branches, has the 3 primary stems I want for the vase shape, but this one right here has become the primary growth leader. So it's growing almost vertically, and the other 2 are growing out in the right direction. So now I need to train this one so it's not quite as vertical. And that's where these sticks come in to help direct that growth. I'm going to take one stick to start pushing it off to the side, and I'll use another stick to start pushing it in the right direction. And this will help push the branches apart. This is a good start to get the branches growing away from each other. The other thing I can do is like the previous tree, and probably I'll do that next year, where I can tie this branch down to a stake in the ground and ensure that it's growing in the right direction. But for this year, I want to see how the rest of the branching turns out. This is still a young tree, so I still have time to train it. Along with the pruning and the training of my fruit trees, I also like to protect them during these winter months. Today's an ideal day. I want to first protect the bark. You may have noticed that all these trees are painted white. Once I started pruning the bottom of the tree, I immediately started putting on this IV Organic 3-in-1 plant guard. Now, for me, I don't have to worry too much about pests during the winter months eating the bark of my tree. That's a big factor of why you might want to use this plant guard. Instead, my primary purpose is to try to keep the bark from splitting. Here in my cold Colorado springs, we end up getting warm days like this. So as things begin to thaw out, the sun will warm up the front side of the tree during the day. At night, it gets pretty cold. The back gets cold. It may not thaw at the same rate. And so what happens is the back of the tree is not thawing and the front of the tree is, and that can cause the bark to split. By painting with this white 3-in-1 plant guard, it helps reflect the sun for more even thawing of the trunk, and it's less likely to split. It's really not a big deal. I just mix up this plant guard and paint it onto the trunk, and it gives me all the protection that I need. I like to use the plant guard at least twice a year. I usually apply it in fall so that I avoid the freeze-thaw cycles in autumn that can cause damage. And then I apply it again here in midwinter before the spring warm-up. Now, while I don't have gnawing pests that will eat the bark, I do have deer that will eat the branches of my tree. So to help keep the deer away, I have to put barriers around my tree. Now, I have chicken wire that I attach to these posts to keep them away from the lower branches. I line up the edges of the wire. It has gone all the way around the tree, and then using wire, I go ahead, thread it behind, and then give it a twist to hold the wire in place. And this is strong enough for any animal trying to get in. This will keep it out. I do this with all of my fruit trees. I have the posts, I have the chicken wire, and then because the deer can reach inside or at least find these tender tips to nibble on, I cover the whole thing with bird netting. For the smaller trees, I'll go ahead and anchor one end of the bird netting to the same wire that I used to attach it. And I've got the bird netting attached to these posts, these colorful posts that my granddaughters painted. And so with basically an umbrella of bird netting over these trees, the deer can't eat the tips and no other animals can get in from the side. I use bird netting on these bigger trees too, but the tree itself ends up supporting the bird netting. I think I'm going to have to go ahead and put in another one of these tall posts and do an umbrella over these big trees soon, but that's a project for another day. I've pruned, I've worked on training these trees, and I've worked on protecting the trees, all on a nice, warm, sunny winter's day. I do have some other videos that show some of this work in more detail, and you can click on one of them now. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.